everyone, welcome to your pre-departure training. I'm Bex.
And I'm Laura, and we're your International Events Coordinators.
Over the next half an hour or so in this video, we're going to take you through everything you need to know before you come out to volunteer with us in Uganda this summer.
I'm going to talk to you first of all about responsible volunteering. It's really important when you come out to Uganda with us that everything you do has a positive impact on the local community that you will be working in. A lot of you may have heard phrases like voluntourism or white saviour. At East African Playgrounds we have a really great reputation for really ethical volunteering, and we want to maintain that, which is why we're giving you this training right now. So I'm going to talk you through what we actually do to make sure that our volunteer projects are as ethical as possible. So before we build the playground, we assess each school according to their values, make sure that they agree that they will uphold our own values when they have a playground installed. We check each school for safety, we make sure that it's safe for you guys to come and volunteer and for the children who attend the school. So each playground is completely unique to the needs of that community. We have assessments of how the children play in each community, what the teachers want, what the parents want, what their aspirations are for the children, and we base each playground design around those aspirations. So it's really specific to each individual community, and we provide training for you guys before you go out, which is what's happening right now. So whilst we're building the playground, we have a safeguarding policy for staff and volunteers that they maintain. So there will be a staff member with you at all times when you're in country, and they are there not only to keep you safe, make sure everything runs smoothly, but also to enforce these safeguarding rules that we have in place. We have training sessions with staff, so our Ugandan staff have worked with hundreds of volunteers just like you in the past, and they're all briefed on working with you guys just to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. We support ethical travel partners, so everyone that we work with, all of our activities providers, trek providers, all support the local economy, they employ local people, and they support local culture and encourage you to get involved with that as well. After we build each playground, we have a long series of monitoring and evaluation, so we don't just build a playground, put it down and leave forever. We come back, do safety checks, make sure that the playground is still fit for use, make sure that it's being used as we would want it to be, and make sure that the standards, ethical and teaching standards, are being upheld at that school.
So most of our volunteers have never travelled to East Africa or Uganda before, so we think it's important to give you a few tips and tricks and tell you about some things that might seem a little bit of a culture shock when you first get to Uganda, but are all just part of the fun and experience of being in the incredible country. So the first thing is service is slow in Uganda. Ugandan time operates a little bit differently to English time. For example, you might be waiting half an hour, 40 minutes for a car, or you might be waiting over an hour for your food to be served in a restaurant. This isn't uncommon. It's all about just learning to go with the flow and trying not to get too frustrated or impatient if things are taking a little bit longer than what you're used to in the UK. The next point is Uganda is a heavily religious country, so it's largely Christian and the rest Islamic. Atheism isn't really a thing in Uganda so much, so we just ask that you avoid conversations about religion where possible, and that if your views don't necessarily match the person's who you're talking to about it, maybe just steer away from that conversation to avoid anyone being offended by anyone else's views or beliefs. The next point is children will stare at you, they will point at you, they will shout the word Muzungu, which basically just means foreigner. It's not an inherently offensive term, but it's just something to get used to. You might not have ever experienced standing out because of the colour of your skin or the way that you look before, so this might be new to you in Uganda. Some of the areas that you visit, particularly at your school and at your project, the children might not have ever had visitors come to their school before, so it will be very new and exciting for them. So you've just got to go along with the fact that you are a person visiting their culture, and for that reason you might stand out a little bit more than what you're used to. Unfortunately, homosexuality is illegal in Uganda. This is something we as East African Playgrounds are more than happy to talk about. We've never had an issue with it before in the past. We've had volunteers and staff members who associate with the LGBTQ+ community, and it's not something we've ever had an issue with, so please don't worry if this concerns you. We just ask that regardless of your sexuality, you try to avoid these topics in conversation. You're not going to change someone's mind in 2, 3 or 4 weeks, as hard as you try, so to avoid anyone being offended, we just ask that volunteers don't openly talk about sexuality with any of our Ugandan staff or community members, again just to avoid anyone being offended. Uganda is a very conservative culture, so public signs of affection are not commonplace. So again, similarly on the note of sexuality, we just ask you to keep this low key and to not display public signs of affection. If you are in a romantic relationship or a romantic relationship is blossoming among our volunteers, again please just try to keep this on the down low and respect the culture that you are in. That being said, holding hands in Uganda is commonplace. It's more often between women and between men and men. It's a sign of friendship. So you might have it that when you're talking to one of our Ugandan staff or volunteer members, they'll take your hand and just hold it for the duration of the conversation. This might be a bit weird for you at first, but it is a sign of friendship. So just try to go along with it and respect that this person is telling you that you are friends with them and being friendly with you. All of our Ugandan staff receive cultural training, so in the same way that we deliver training to our British volunteers on what it means to come out to Uganda, we also give our Ugandan staff training on what it means to work with British volunteers. So we try and bridge that cultural gap as much as possible. However, you might have community volunteers on your project, so these are people just within the community that you're building at who want to help out whilst you're there and working on the project. Because these people are just volunteers, they don't receive any kind of formal or cultural training from East African Playgrounds, so please just be aware there might be a bit more of a culture gap between yourself and any of the community volunteers, but this should never be an issue. If you have any queries, just talk to one of the build team and they'll be able to assist in that situation. So in terms of donations from the UK, we ask our volunteers not to bring out any physical donations to hand out to the children or to the schools during their time in Uganda. The support that we're offering the schools that we work with in terms of building the playground and running our teacher training, you guys being out there, is incredibly valuable, but it's also sustainable. Volunteers bringing out batches of physical materials like books or pens and paper, as much as they might be nice for the children to receive, it's not a sustainable transaction. So we want to make sure that the support and aid that we're offering to these schools is sustainable in every way that it can be. We want to move away from this dependency culture where volunteers go out, they leave stuff at school, like leave donations, and then never see them again. So we just ask that our volunteers don't bring out physical donations to the schools. It's really important when you're out and about in Uganda that you pay a fair price for any goods and services that you're buying. So whether this is getting a boda ride into town or buying some harem pants at the market, it's important that you pay a fair price. What this means is you're not paying more than you should just because you're a tourist, and it means you're not haggling too hard to get the best deal and a person isn't making a fair wage. So our summer project officers will be able to advise you on how much you should be paying for each goods and services, so please try to stick to this as much as possible. When you're building at the playground, it's really important that you listen to the advice and the tasks given to you by our build team. These guys are experts, they build playgrounds all year round, they know what they're doing, so when they give you jobs and tasks to do and they give you advice on how you should be doing them, please do respect their decisions and listen to what they have to say. The golden rule of East African Playgrounds is that our staff are there to be your friends, but nothing more. So this applies to all of our EAP staff, both Ugandan and our British staff as well. We don't want any of our staff to want to work for East African Playgrounds because they think there's a possibility that they might start a relationship with one of our volunteers. So we ask to avoid this scenario, and to maintain professionality, you please make sure these boundaries are adhered to. Make friends with all of our staff and our build team, but nothing more.
So we're going to talk you through some of the things that can help you be as responsible as possible while you're volunteering with us. So first of all, please always be aware of your actions and the impact that they're having on the community and the children that you're interacting with. As I said, you are representatives of EAP and we have a really high reputation and we want to maintain that, so please remember that at all times. We'd like you to dress appropriately. So in Uganda it's quite a conservative culture. They tend to dress quite smart and they don't show their shoulders, stomach or knees, so we ask you to do the same. So we don't want you wearing any vest tops and things like that. That applies to both males and females. We ask as well that you don't bring any camouflage clothing to Uganda. In terms of drinking and smoking, there's opportunities to have a few beers at the hostel that you'll stay at on your rest days and weekends, and to have fun with your fellow volunteers. Obviously it's not appropriate to be drunk or to have drinks on a playground, so we do not tolerate alcohol or drinking on any of the days where you are volunteering. If you do smoke, you are permitted to do so on the playground and at the school, but just please make sure that you always are very discreet about this. Do not do it in front of children. Find a place where you are in private and where you can do it without anyone watching you. We have a zero tolerance policy with drugs. If you are caught with any drugs at any point during your time in Uganda, you will be immediately sent home and brought off project. So as we mentioned before, we have a child safeguarding policy. This means that we try and do as much as we can to make sure that all of the children who interact with our volunteers are kept as safe as possible. So what is child safeguarding to start off with? It's the protection of young people's well-being by preventing any preventable harm that could be done to them. So the main thing for you to think about is, would it be appropriate in the UK? In the UK, would you go to a school, pick up a toddler that you don't know or have any connection with and carry them around the school for an hour? No, you wouldn't. In the UK, would you pick up a child without their parents' permission? You wouldn't. Would you pick up a child who's not wearing any clothes? You wouldn't. So please don't do any of this in Uganda. It's just really important to think back, would this be appropriate in the UK? And if not, then just don't do it in Uganda. There's also some different local perceptions and stories. For example, one of them is that parents think that it is lucky if a tourist picks up their baby and that their baby will have good luck from that. If someone says that to you and if they ask you to hold their child for good luck, please don't do it. We don't want to reinforce these perceptions and these stories, because there might be another tourist that comes along who's not as nice as you are and who doesn't have good intentions, so we don't want to reinforce any of that. Please do not share any personal details about the children that you interact with, for example their age, the name or location of the school, with anyone at all. The things to think about is, are your actions having a positive effect on the children that you're interacting with? And that's something to think about at all times while you're in Uganda. So to help with all of this as well, we have a photography and social media policy that we want all of you to stick to. So a main thing to think about when you're taking photos in Uganda, much like with child safeguarding, as I've said, if you wouldn't take that photo in the UK, don't take it in Uganda. For example, you wouldn't walk onto a playground in the UK, pick up a child and have a photo of you holding them if you have no connection to that child. Similarly, you wouldn't have a photo of you with 15 children huddled all around you. It just wouldn't be appropriate, and you certainly wouldn't share these images on social media. So similarly, it's not appropriate to do that in Uganda as well. We know though that sometimes it can be difficult to know what's okay and what's not. So we figured out some guidelines of how you can figure out what is appropriate.
So every project will have 2 or 3 group photographers. We'll appoint these photographers. It can be anyone who likes taking photos and wants that role. These photographers will receive training from East African Playgrounds on our brand guidelines, on our child safeguarding policies. We'll also seek to gain informed consent from the teachers and the parents at the school which you will be volunteering at, which means we know we have permission to share these photos afterwards. The group photographers will be taking photos throughout your time at the school, whilst you're building and whilst you're doing the creative play in the afternoons, so plenty of pictures will exist of you interacting with the kids and having fun on the open day, etc. However, if you're not the group photographer, as an East African Playgrounds volunteer, you are not permitted to take any photos which have a child in the frame. Whether the child is looking at the camera or whether you're just taking a photo of the children playing, these type of images are not permitted to be taken or shared by any volunteers other than the group photographers. You are, of course, allowed to take photos of everything else that you do, so whilst you're trekking, whilst you're building, on the weekends, on your rest days when you're doing any of the activities. You're allowed to take photos of each other, with consent of course, and you're also allowed to take photos with any Ugandan adults after you have their informed consent. The only images that aren't permitted are images which have children in them. But like we said, we know that our volunteers want to share images after they come back. It's always really exciting to be able to show your friends and family the incredible time you had out in Uganda. So photos of you interacting with the children on open day and during creative play sessions will exist. After you get back from your project, the group photographers will upload all of their photos to a shared Google Drive, so you can download them and share them from there. What this means is we know all of the photographs being shared are in adherence to our brand guidelines and our safeguarding policies. So in sum, here are just a few questions you should always have in the back of your mind when you're sharing your experiences and your stories from Uganda. Firstly, ask yourself, what are your motivations for sharing this story? And bear in mind whether the language that you use and the way you share the story, if that's contributing and confirming the negative stereotypes that people might hold about Uganda, or whether it's working towards challenging the narrative and promoting Uganda in a positive way. If you plan to share any images publicly, have a think about whether the people that you're sharing and the story that you're telling, whether that would bring about a sense of pride in the people that you're talking about, or whether it would bring about a sense of shame. Ultimately, we always want to be showing Uganda for what it has and not what it lacks.
So just to sum up all of that, we've got a few things that you can do to make sure that you're volunteering as responsibly as you possibly can. So please don't spend any time alone with individual children. Don't focus on any children or leave anyone out. We don't want anyone to get upset or feel left out in any way. But equally, we don't want you and the children forming too strong bonds, because ultimately you're going to be leaving at the end of your project. Please do not exchange contact information with any of the children. If you choose to exchange contact information with adults, please bear in mind what that relationship means to you compared with what it means to them. Do you intend on actually following through with that and contacting them in the future? Don't give people money or gifts. Have a think, is it appropriate in the UK? If not, it's not appropriate in Uganda either. And finally, how can you keep the children at the school that you're volunteering at as safe as possible? Great, so that concludes our ethical volunteering side of things. We're now going to talk you through some of the Uganda logistics, what you can expect in country, everything from what you're going to be packing, your vaccinations, things like that. So we're going to start with vaccinations. It's really important that you book an appointment with your GP as soon as possible. It gets a lot harder to book travel appointments as it gets closer to summer, so please book them now and go and have a consultation, figure out which vaccinations you need and get them done ASAP. It can be more expensive the closer you get to summer, so please try and get that done as soon as possible. Just for your reference, you will be building the playground in Jinja, which is in the centre south of Uganda, and you will be trekking in Lake Bunyoni and the Bwindi Forest, which is in the southwest of Uganda, just in case you would like to look on a map for the vaccinations that you need for different areas. A good website to check out is the NHS Fit for Travel Uganda website, which gives you an overview of all of the vaccinations that you will need. Just a reminder as well that you do need malaria tablets when you are in Uganda. The cheapest place for these seems to be from Asda or Lloyd's Pharmacy. And finally, on that note, we aim for you to never be more than 2 hours away from medical assistance. Insurance is a really important part of your trip. It is compulsory to have insurance when you come out and volunteer with us, and it must be booked 1 month before you fly. We do actually have East African Playgrounds travel insurance that you can use, specially tailored to everything you'll be doing on the trip, and covers you for those eventualities. If you choose to use a different insurance provider, you must make sure that it covers grade 5 whitewater rafting. Even if you do not intend on doing grade 5 whitewater rafting, it just means that you're covered for anything else that you'll be doing, for example safari or kayaking, things like that. If you choose a different policy rather than our East African Playgrounds one, you must email this to gorilla@eastafricanplaygrounds.org with your policy number and your emergency contact number, just so that we have that on record and we can check through it. So I'm just going to talk through your kit list, everything you need to bring to Uganda. It's definitely worth saying that you do not need to go out and spend a fortune on your kit. When I went out last year, I think I spent about £20 on a few new bits and bobs, but there's really no need to spend a ton of money. There's definitely lots of things that you can borrow off friends and family, buy really cheap from charity shops or on eBay, and a lot of it are things that you probably will have already. So I'm just going to go through the various things that you need. You can read it for yourself, but I'm going to go through some of the key points. So in terms of documentation, it's definitely worth having printouts of all of your travel documents, having a photocopy of your passport and your yellow fever vaccination, carrying with you your travel itinerary, and also having a printout of your insurance documents is really important. In terms of toiletries, please try and make sure when you can that your toiletries are biodegradable. Quite often when you shower, this will then just run off into the nearby fields or lakes and things like that, and we obviously don't want to be polluting these, so when you can, make sure that it's biodegradable. Just a note on any sanitary items, there's no need to worry, as there are plenty of opportunities to dispose of sanitary items in a hygienic way when you're both on project or on the trek. In terms of first aid kit, it's worth having a look through and carefully deciding what you do want to bring. I would say that personally the most useful things that I found were having rehydration sachets. They're just great even if you feel a little bit under the weather or a bit dehydrated. You have one and you just instantly feel loads better. You do, as mentioned before, you do need malaria tablets, and you need sun cream as well, because the sun is really powerful over there. It's definitely worth thinking about bringing Imodium and painkillers and things like that as well. In terms of living equipment, one of your most important pieces of kit will be a really good water bottle. Please bring one with a lid, with a cap that covers your mouthpiece. This is just in case you drop it, it's going to be really hard to clean the mouthpiece and make sure that it's hygienic for you to drink from again, so please bring one that's covered. You will need a sleeping bag, a pillowcase and a bed sheet as well. It's definitely also worth bringing a good small backpack. For gorilla trekkers, each night your big bags will be transported via the bus from campsite to campsite, but you will need a day bag to carry around your water and things like that you want during the day while you're trekking. You don't need to spend loads of money on this, but if you have one that has a strap around your waist that gives a little bit extra support, then that's something that is really useful. In terms of clothing, I just want to say a quick note that although we do ask you to cover up your shoulders, stomach and knees, at all times when you are on the playground in the local community, trekking, or in Ginger Town. It is worth saying that at the hostel it's quite nice to bring something nicer to wear in the evenings where you can enjoy yourself a bit more. Also, on that note, you are permitted to wear swimming costumes at the hostel and at the swimming pool where it's appropriate. You don't need to cover up in any way when you're wearing swimming costumes, so that's fine to bring. It's really worth going through our whole kit list and checking everything bit by bit and seeing that you've got everything that you'll need for Uganda. We've put together some tips for packing. You obviously won't have a wardrobe when you're out in Uganda. You might be moving around quite a bit, especially if you're gorilla trekking. So please try and pack as light as possible. There's never more than about 8 days between each time you'll have an opportunity to wash your clothes. So you definitely don't need a set of clothes for every single day that you'll be out in Uganda. There are plenty of opportunities to wash them. Please try not to bring valuables. Obviously bring your phone and things and cameras and things like that, but where you can, just avoid bringing valuables. Please keep an eye when you're in Uganda on all of the valuables that you do bring, like your phone. And remember as well to leave room for any souvenirs that you want to bring back to everyone in the UK. Pack practical, so bring some strong shoes for working on the playground in, some clothes that are light to wear that won't make you too hot when you're digging a hole on the playground, and some that you don't mind getting a bit dirty with paint and things like that. Avoid bringing white clothes. Last year I was told to avoid bringing white clothes and I didn't listen, and all of my clothes came back brown. So please don't do that. If you don't mind your clothes getting a bit mucky, then that's fine, but please do be aware of that. Bring some smart clothes to wear. Ugandans take a lot of pride in their appearance. You'll see Ugandan men wearing shirts and suit trousers every day, so please think of that as well. Bring a few nice bits to wear, especially in the evenings on the playground or on your open day, for example. Your walking boots are the most important kit. You need to make sure that you have worn them in. You need to buy them a couple of months before you go out and wear them a lot, get used to them, wear them to the airport. If in the unfortunate event that your baggage goes missing, that is the one thing that we can't really replace for you, where you can borrow clothes and things like that, but you can't really borrow walking boots. So please make sure that you do wear these to the airport and that you have completely worn them in before you come to Uganda.
So you'll need a visa to enter into Uganda. It's important you apply for this at least 4 weeks before you are planning on entering the country, so 4 weeks before you fly. We have really easy instructions to follow that we'll send out to you and put on the Facebook groups of a step-by-step guide of how to go through the visa application process. It is a really easy online application form that you should just be able to fill out with no problem. And then in a few weeks' time, the Ugandan immigration office will email you your visa. You just have to then print it off and bring a printed copy with you to the airport. The visa should cost $50, which is approximately around £35, but just note, if you're an Irish volunteer with an Irish passport, you don't need a visa to come to Uganda. So now I'm just going to talk through a few of the practicalities of living in Uganda. So in terms of time difference, Uganda is 2 hours ahead of the UK. This is great because it means you won't be hit by jet lag, and when you do contact home there isn't a big time gap to organise. All the water that you will need throughout your time in Uganda will be provided as safe drinking water for you. Gorilla trekkers, when you're on the trek, it'll just be bottled water, and then for everyone, when you're on the playground, we have a big water filter system. So you'll collect the water from a nearby pump each morning, and then we'll put it through our filter system so it's safe for you to drink throughout the day. Electricity is not always guaranteed in Uganda. There are quite often power cuts. It's unlikely that you'll have electricity at your school on project, although you will be able to get it every couple of days when you have rest days or on your weekends as well. Plugs in Uganda are the same as British plugs, so there's no need to bring any travel adapters. Money in Uganda is Ugandan shillings. These aren't available to purchase in the UK, so you have to bring out US dollars that are no older than 10 years old, and then we change them when you're in Uganda into Ugandan shillings. The exchange rate is roughly £1 to 5,000 shillings, so it's quite an inflated currency that can take you a while to get your head round, but it's pretty easy once you've figured it out. To figure out how much spending money you should bring depends on whether you're on the Guerrilla Trek or the Volunteer Project, and it also depends on how many activities you want to do whilst you're in Uganda and the prices of these activities. To see a full price list of different activities and the weekend options for Volunteer Project volunteers, see the pages on our website that are Preparing for Your Guerrilla Trek and Preparing for Your Volunteer Project. Please bring out a debit card with you for emergencies so that you can draw money from an ATM should you need it, but generally bring your spending money in US dollars to change into Ugandan shillings when you're there. It's not a bad idea to bring maybe £50 to £100 of British money as well, so that you can change it and get a better exchange rate in Uganda as opposed to drawing money out of an ATM, and then if you don't use it you haven't lost any money taking it home with the exchange rate. Don't use cash cards or any type of traveller's checks because they simply won't work out in Uganda. In terms of using your phone and contacting home, if you bring out an unlocked smartphone or regular brick phone, we should be able to give you a Ugandan SIM which you can put into your phone and then use as normal. It works in the same way as a pay-as-you-go mobile in the UK. You just top it up with a little bit of credit and then you use this credit to buy data or to make calls and texts. The cheapest way to contact home is to buy some data and then make WhatsApp or Facebook calls, or you can use international calls from your Ugandan SIM. It will be cheaper than using your British phone, but there are ways around that too. Local transport in Uganda will mainly be on a minibus, so either a Rosa or a Matatu to get you from A to B in your group. And then on the weekends or on your rest days you can choose to get on a boda, which is a motorbike taxi. It's how most people get from A to B in Uganda, so you can choose to get on one of those if you want, but there'll always be the option for you to have a taxi in a car as well. Wi-Fi won't be available when you're on project or when you're on the trek, however it will be available at the hostel and when you're on the weekends, so you can use that to contact home then if you want, but try not to rely on it too much as it can drop in and out and be a little unreliable. In terms of contacting home, it's better to promise less frequently and then give a happy surprise to your friends and family than to promise you'll get in touch with them every day and then they have a few days where they don't hear from you and they're really worried. So realistically you can probably get in touch every 2 to 3 days, but if you try to tell everyone at home you'll get in touch once a week, that covers all the bases and you can get in touch as much or as little as you would like to. Look, when you arrive in Uganda, one of us will be there to pick you up from the airport. Make sure that you have your yellow fever certificate and your printed visa in your hand luggage so that they're easy to get at as you come through immigration. If you've chosen to arrive at a significantly different time or date to the rest of your volunteering group, you may have to pay for your own airport transfers to and from either UWEC, which is the Ugandan Wildlife Centre, or to your project. However, this should be discussed with your coordinator in advance to you arriving in Uganda.
So I'm just going to talk you through what you can expect when you're trekking. Obviously if you're volunteer project you can skip through this bit. So the difficulty level is tough but definitely manageable. You don't need to be super fit to do it in any way. There are a few days where you don't do that much walking and it's a lot more cultural visits. For example, one day you visit a coffee plantation as well, but definitely on the second day of trekking it is a long walk, and there are some hills involved. So I would say that it's definitely worth doing a couple of practice walks beforehand, but you don't by any means need to be really fit to do the trek. So just to talk you through a little bit more about the trek, you do 4 days of trekking. This is through the Guerrilla Highlands, where you can see in the distance the beautiful views of the Rwandan volcanoes. You walk by the lakes and forests of southwestern Uganda. You're supported by the Ugandan Trek team, and they know loads about the history and culture of the area. They can tell you everything that you need to know and answer all of your questions. Finally, on the 5th day is when you get to trek to see the gorillas. This is in Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, and you get to go and see some of the last remaining silverback mountain gorillas. You spend around 1 hour watching the gorillas, and then you trek back to the entrance. We have a support bus that travels in between campsites, which will take your main luggage, so there's no need to carry any unnecessary items while you're trekking, and this will also take unwell volunteers. If you're feeling a bit under the weather one day, you can just take the bus instead of trekking. During the playground build, here's what you can expect. It can be a lot of hard physical work, but it's a lot of fun as well. You get to choose what activities you want to do. So for example, if you're not a big fan of digging, you can bolt tyres or paint, and there's lots of opportunities to get involved with different activities. You're always there supported by our Ugandan build team. They will brief you on everything you need to know safety wise and how to go about building the playground the whole way through project. It's important as well that you listen to what they say. They have a lot of experience in what they do. You do also have community volunteers that will come from the community and they come and help you build the playground as well. You will work with them at the end to decide on the colour scheme for your playground. In terms of what to expect for creative play, these creative play sessions will take place in your afternoons. You'll get to play some games, interact with the children and the teachers, and it's a great time to just have some fun. These are guided by our creative play coordinators. Our creative play coordinators train the teachers in incorporating play learning into to the school system there. So you'll help to play games like Duck Duck Goose, run around with the kids. You might do some arts and crafts and things like that. It's a really great opportunity to just get involved and get to know the local community a little bit better.
So your food and accommodation when you're on the playground. For food, all of your meals, 3 meals a day, will be prepared by one of our East African playground chefs. They'll live with you on project, they'll cook you breakfast, give you a snack at around 11 o'clock, and then provide lunch and dinner as well. The food is a mix of traditional Ugandan food and some Western food as well. Because there are 8 chefs, they'll be able to cater for any dietary requirements and preferences that you have as well. In terms of accommodation, we'll clear out one of the classrooms to make a dorm room for you. So it's pretty basic. You'll have mattresses and mosquito nets, but it will be comfortable with your sleeping bag and your pillows as well. The toilets on project are normally long drop toilets, and you'll be having bucket showers, which, as the name suggests, is just a shower with a bucket. For our gorilla trekkers, when you're trekking, accommodation will be single sex tents of up to 4 people. They're already set up and waiting for you when you arrive at each campsite in the afternoon, which is a really great feeling. And the food will be provided by local families and homestays at the campsites that you stay at each night. They will do their best to cater for any dietary requirements, and it will all be traditional Ugandan food, which is really tasty. Toilets are normally eco toilets or long drops, and the showers will be bucket showers and the option to swim in the lake as well and have a bit of a wash in the lake. If you're on the gorilla trek, you'll have a couple of rest days in amongst your project where you can do some of the fun activities that are on offer in Jinja, such as whitewater rafting, kayaking on the River Nile, going quad biking or horse riding. These are all completely optional and they all come in at different prices as well. So have a think about what activities you want to do and how much spending money to bring out with you. If you're on the 4-week volunteer project, you'll have 3 different weekends designated to river weekend, your safari weekend and your activities weekend, and you'll have different options about where you can stay on these weekends and what activities you can do. To have a look at all of the different options for you, check out the UVP weekend activities leaflet on our website as well. So when you finally come home from Uganda and you're back in the UK, there's a few things to think about. If you've been near the Nile water or on the trek, if you've dipped into any of the lakes, you will need to get a Bilharzia health check. It's really easy, you just need to go to your GP and have a blood test to see if you've been infected or not. If you have, you just have to take a course of antibiotics, and if not, you're good to go. There's also the opportunity for you to further your impact with East African Playgrounds if you've had an amazing time, which I'm sure you will, and you want to continue supporting the great work that East African Playgrounds does. There are plenty of opportunities for you to get involved, including joining our alumni club and coming to our alumni celebrations back in the UK as well. And then finally, spreading awareness of the awesome time that you've had out in Uganda, thinking back to what we've said about the photography and social media guidelines, and just making sure you're representing East African Playgrounds and sharing stories and images that portray Uganda in a really positive light and showing Uganda for what it has and not what it lacks. Thanks everyone for taking part in our pre-departure training. There'll be a little quiz linked in the description box below. We just need you to fill out that quiz to make sure you've understood everything that we've talked about today and that you've taken part in our training. Hopefully we've answered all of the questions that you might have had, but if not, feel free to shoot us a message or give us a call to discuss anything else that crops up.
Thank you for watching, and see you in Uganda soon.
Bye!